What was the ruin of Sparta and Athens but this, that mighty as they were in war, they spurned from them as aliens those whom they had conquered? Claudius, Emperor of Rome, AD 48. Severn Valley, Siluria, September AD 59. Could it only have been 10 minutes? Gaius Valerius Verrens gritted his teeth behind his smile, and his eyes locked on his opponent's. But the message, if message there was beneath those hooded lids, was the opposite of what he wanted to see. The bastard was mocking him. He breathed hard through his nostrils, drawing in the sharp pine scent of the freshly cut stump on which his right elbow rested. At the same time he felt the agony that had been tearing the big muscle in his upper arm ease a little. He channeled the relief up into his forearm and along his inner wrist to the fingers of his right hand. The increase in power must have been infinitesimal. He barely registered it himself. But he noticed a slight movement as Crespo's eyebrows twitched, and he knew the centurion had sensed it too. So, the hand that gripped his, the elbow resting precisely to the left of his own, was horny and calloused, and had all the yield of a hypercoarsed brick. Fingers like talons clasped with a force designed to break bone, but he resisted the temptation to meet the challenge. Instead, he directed all his own strength into moving Crespo's fist to the left. Any movement, even a hair's breadth, would do. So far, Crespo hadn't yielded even that, but then again, neither had he. The thought made him grin, and the crowd of legionaries ringing the tree stump cheered encouragement at the first sign of confidence. Arm wrestling was a favoured pastime in the first cohort of the 20th Legion. All you needed was a flat surface and the inclination. Sometimes they wrestled for fun, sometimes to gamble, and sometimes because they hated each other's guts. The first had been in the temporary camp in the lee of the Silurian hill fort for 6 days. When the cavalry patrol had failed to return 2 weeks earlier, the legate's reaction had been immediate. Reprisal in force. 3,000 men, 5 legionary cohorts, and a mixed unit of auxiliary infantry and horse from Gaul and Thrace had marched behind their standards down the River Severn, then west into the rough hill country beyond. They had found the heads, 20 of them, still in their helmets, like marker points on a trail. A few unfortunate Celtic peasants, picked up along the way and put to the question, had led them here. It had taken 5 of those 6 days to dig the ditch and rampart around the base of the rugged hill, which now entirely isolated the fort's inhabitants from either help or escape. When the legionaries weren't digging, they spent the time on guard, drilling, exercising or patrolling. But during their occasional rest periods, they were able to sit outside their leather 8-man tents and do the things soldiers always do: mend and polish their equipment, gamble their pay away, and grumble about their officers, or just sit and stare at the sky and the blue-grey haze of the distant mountains. Valerius concentrated on his right arm, attempting to will more power into it. The big muscle bulged below the short sleeve of his tunic, as if it were trying to burst free from the skin, and he could see the twisting snakes of dark veins beneath the tanned surface. It had swelled to the size of a small melon, and matched that of Crespo, who was judged the strongest man in the cohort. The forearm was broad, tapering towards the wrist, where the tendons stood out like tree roots. His wrist was bound firmly to Crespo's by a strap of red cloth, so that neither man could shift his grip and win by trickery. But he knew Crespo would try, because Crespo was a cheat, a liar, and a thief. But he was also a senior centurion, which made him untouchable. Almost. He had discovered Crespo beating one of the new recruits, young Quintus from Ravenna, with the gnarled vine stick he carried as the traditional badge of his rank. Every centurion disciplined his men, because discipline was what made a legion, but Crespo confused discipline with brutality. Or maybe he just enjoyed brutality for its own sake, because he had beaten Quintus half to death. When Valerius ordered him to stop, Crespo had looked him up and down with those expressionless ice-chip eyes of his. The two men had a history, of sorts, but one that was more animal wariness than physical hostility. The first time they'd met had been like 2 dogs coming together on a narrow path. A rising of the hackles, a sizing up of strengths and weaknesses, a quick sniff and a moving on. Gone, but far from forgotten. Now he stared into Crespo's features from 2 feet away. Did he sense uncertainty? By the gods, he hoped so. The fire which had started in the crook of his elbow was moving up into his shoulder and on into the base of his neck, and it was like no pain he'd ever experienced.